I'm Duncan Lievi, and in this video I will be addressing, or rather contextualizing, the greatest tennis player of all time debate in tennis, which has been rampant for the better part of a decade, more than a decade actually. Before that, I'll be addressing this in a very calm, laid back, almost non-serious manner, so if that grinds your gears, I completely understand. I'll see you, hopefully, in another video. For those who are left, first of all, I have to say that it's important to consider why we are having this debate, because they're not done yet. They're still active players, and we feel the need to engage in this discussion for kicks, to maybe emphasize how big of fans we are of the sport, because we know all these different factors which should be considered when making the case for the greatest tennis player of all time. We have the image in our heads. We have our own customized personal images of what the greatest tennis player of all time should be. And we try to associate these attributes to a given player to support our narrative. And that's one of my points, is that this debate is much more relevant to us than the players themselves right now. They are active players. They are carving their legacy as we speak. We happen to live in a time where we are blessed to watch the three, probably the greatest tennis players to play this beautiful sport professionally, and we're not happy. We want to argue amongst each other, and we want to group ourselves as fans of one of those three and argue against the other opposing fan bases to support our guy and say that he is better because XYZ. I'll get to the XYZ later, but it's for us. We are having this debate for our sake because we want that. The stories are not over. Their respective careers are still active, like I said. So why are we having this? Because we're greedy, because it's not enough. We want to compare. We want to be sure. We want to be right. We want to conquer discourse because that is important to us. But that's the entire concept of having this debate is great. Just have it. But have it in a lighthearted manner, have some respect, because in the end, we are diminishing the legacy of the sport itself if we are reducing ourselves to be critics for the sake of being critics. Celebrate the fact that we are so lucky. I'm not sure whether any other sport is going through as much of a golden era as tennis is, and it has been for the better part of a decade, or more, I should say, I'd say ever since the rise of Federer in 2003-4. It's been a golden age for various reasons. So instead of celebrating that, we have made it into a war when it does not have to be. If people get their kicks from having this debate, good, but the antagonistic qualities are not necessary. I personally have been, ever since I was a teenager, or even before 2007, I remember watching tennis, 2006, and even before that, my grandmother got me into tennis as well. So I was a very little kid, and I had been a fan of Federer because of the style of play and the elegance and the fluidity. And that never goes away. Those things stay with you. But you can detach yourself from that player enough to appreciate the sport and what the sport benefits from by having these players play and expand its reach, getting more people to watch it, having interesting narratives, among which one is the greatest tennis player of all time debate. And we should have that conversation with full knowledge that it's an unfinished story and we are doing it for entertainment, for maybe getting to know the sport better, and to represent our fandom and also the player that we root for, but in a respectful and very, how do I put this? Don't make enemies out of people who have a different opinion than you. Just try to be understanding, and even if you don't, address that. Say that you don't agree for these reasons, but you can see their perspective for what it is. It's fine to have opposing views, but you don't have to come up with names of various fan bases in a negative light Oh, Rafa-tards, Fed-tards, and jokers. Why? Why? These are great people. Even to diminish these players, why would you want to do that? We are so fortunate to be watching these performers, these players, these sportsmen, these athletes, these celebrities, and we have to, because I've seen YouTube comment sections, which you should never do, but it is important. It's a part of the game. If you want to, it's part of what you need to do to assess where people stand. Of course, you have to listen to the kinds of arguments being made. And it's so vile, so malicious. People attack each other personally based on them having different views as to who the best player should be. Why? It's just, I think people are gaining some superiority points in their own mind by saying that their player is better because XYZ. So, if you're having this debate for these reasons, then this is not the place for you, or most other reliable tennis sources, or anyone who likes to have a good conversation. Because if you are that close-minded, then there's no value in having that debate, because you're not going to get anywhere. They will be headstrong and close-minded. That's not a good combination. Now, that said, like I said, we are having this debate for ourselves more than the players themselves. They do care about this. Djokovic, more than the other two, as far as we know, cares about the Grand Slam race, and he's already overtaken Federer in the weeks at number one. And it is very, very impressive that he's doing this through the 2010s and beyond, as we've seen. He more than anybody else has fended off the next gen efficiently. As it stands currently on hard courts and even grass, grass is Federer's domain still, more than Djokovic's. But when it comes to the hard court Grand Slams, the final boss is still Djokovic. It will be that way for the next few years. I do not see any reason why we have to write off Djokovic unless he goes through a personal diminishing in his motivation. So if his motivation falls down, then he will go through something similar as he did after recovering from the elbow injury in 2018 early, and his motivation would go down. And that's the only scenario in which I can see, or if he has an injury, which I really don't want. So that said, I will be making particular player videos of the three, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, stating their cases, their claims to the title, without declaring anybody. So this is a spoiler. I will not be declaring with certainty that this player is the greatest tennis player of all time. Why? Because everyone has their personal recipe for coming up with this dish being the greatest tennis player of all time. We have all these various ingredients being, for example, statistics. Grand Slams, 1 weeks at world number 1, Masters 1000 titles, total ATP titles, all these top 10 wins against rivals, wins against former rivals, all of these things. These are statistics. Then you have public opinion, how much of an ambassador this person is to the sport, style of play, adaptability, durability, aesthetic qualities, and how much endorsements, career prize money. And of course, these may seem to be less important to some people, and it's fine, but you have to consider all of these factors because it's a multivariate equation, and you cannot ignore them. You cannot simply say that, for example, today, you cannot simply rule out Djokovic's case simply because he has fewer Grand Slams than Federer and Nadal. It's very ignorant, and it's very conceited if you do that so quickly, because he might not win another Grand Slam, however unlikely that may be to say right now, but still you cannot rule out his other accomplishments, in most of which outshine the other two. So you have to approach it in a very holistic manner, very respectful manner as well. Take that player to be the player you would be a fan of, and then try to figure out why. That's how I would approach it. If, for example, if you're not a fan of Federer, then you step out of that role that you have assigned to yourself, and then you think, okay, so let me think why, if at all, I can see myself being a fan of this player. Forget he's Federer. And then you see the guy play and how he responds in interviews, how he represents the sport, what his accomplishments are, what his style of play is, all of those things. And approach it from it as unbiased as you can. And then try to figure out what qualities of the player you like. Because that's how objective you have to be. Because we always assign certain levels of bias. And that's unavoidable. My entire intention is to water that down as much as possible. So that we can give each of those three, and maybe other players, a fair shake. Right? That's my intention. And another thing that needs to be addressed is that this is still a hypothetical debate. Why? Because greatest tennis player of all time, to approach it from the grassroots level, many players play the sport because of complete luck. Some people are not afforded the chance to ever try to be on the ATP tour. We are considering players who've played the sport, who've been lucky enough to get the opportunity to play the sport, surround themselves with coaches, a family which supports this opportunity, and of course then you have the player's personal attributes, the talent, the will, motivation, ability to learn, adaptability, all those things. So we were talking of a very hypothetical scenario to declare anybody the greatest tennis player of all time. And of course we have to factor in recency bias as well. We are in 2021. Who's to say Rod Laver playing today would be any better or worse than what he was in the 60s? So these things require to be considered. You have to, even if you don't want to, you have to consider all of these things, however bland they might seem on the surface. So those will be the general points that I will be taking into consideration while making the cases for these three and also others. Maybe Rod Laver, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, all of them. I'll try to, at least, if I have enough material to make the case for those players as well. That's it. Thank you. This is the most important, most spicy debate that people keep coming back to. And like I said, when I make these claims, it will be a state-of-the-art sort of thing. It will be the most recent addition in an ongoing narrative. The careers are not over. We are not going to close the book on this anytime soon. It's just for our sake that we have this debate in a healthy, happy manner. You come out knowing the three contenders better after every debate. That should be the main goal, not to win right now, because you can't win right now. The careers are not over, like I said. Thank you for watching, and I will see all of you soon.